Hello everybody, you're very welcome to the second in our webinar series. Tonight we have a guest, Bill Besselman, who is a former VP Connected Fitness and Integration at Under Armour and now is Chief Strategy Officer with Metrofit. Before we go and introduce Bill, I'm also joined as usual by Peter Larkin, CEO of Metrofit. Hello Peter.
Hello.
Hi everybody.
Okay, and also the CTO from Metrofit, Anne Bruin. Anne, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Bill, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
How are you? Say hello to our attendees.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing today?
Okay, so, and my slides decided to go where? There we go. So Bill, maybe you could just take a second there and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, you got it. Just by way of background, I spent the last 3.5 years or so at Under Armour, leading up corporate strategy, consumer insights, and business development. And over the last 18 months, led the acquisitions that we did of the MyFitness, MyFitnessPal, and Endomondo businesses, which came together to create the Connected Fitness business. And spent the last couple of months at my time at Under Armour, 6-9 months at Under Armour, putting those businesses together, integrating them into the single Connected Fitness business, working with the leaders of that team and with Kevin to build out the community, as well as to launch the HealthBox product, which came into the market, or was at least announced into the market in January, and is now able to be purchased at underarmour.com, as well as other stores. So the net of it is I spent about 3.5 years really helping lay the groundwork for the future strategy for UA, as well as execute a little bit of the digital strategy that came out of that work.
Okay, so I mean, obviously a very exciting time for Under Armour as they start to develop this the monitoring part of their business, and they focus very much on individuals. What would be the outlook in terms of team monitoring as we're looking at with Metrofit?
I think I think that was well said, Brian. Under Armour's approach into the market, with not surprisingly being a consumer-driven brand, was very much focused on the consumer, individual consumers, individual athletes, and trying to win those athletes and take advantage of the monitoring and wearables trend that's going on, but not just for the sake of monitoring and wearables, but to really deliver on the mission that they had, which is making all athletes better. But it was a athlete first, consumer first approach, with an understanding that as a company founded from team sports, that they would get to the team market, that ultimately teams, coaches, and teams and trainers and all the leaders and folks associated with keeping teams performing would be a place that Under Armour got to eventually. And so it was a critical audience to win, but at least in Under Armour's view, winning the individual athlete first, given the existing trends in the position of things like MyFitness and MyFitnessPal, and the fact that they had millions and millions of people already in those, it was better to walk to the team market through the consumer market first. But we had at the time a very positive view for getting to the team market. We think that's a natural next step, but it takes a lot more sophistication at the same time. Delivering insights to an athlete just takes the data from that athlete, and there's not a lot of complex interaction between athletes, if you will. Obviously, individual athlete, the elements of their performance are not simple, but it's easier to handle one person than it is to take a team of 10 basketball players, or 90 football players, or X number of swimmers, etc. So solving the team issues are just far more challenging, but absolutely ones that can be solved in the same way.
Sure, and if you're looking at MyFitness and MyFitnessPal and Endomondo, I mean, they work off a very similar platform and don't go into a huge amount of detail in terms of what an athlete, in terms of the broad spectrum of analytics that an athlete would use. They may be more targeted at the more recreational athlete as opposed to somebody who's more serious. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think when you dig into those communities, you'll see that there's a range from the recreational athlete to the very serious athlete. But there's only so much that you can do in a generic app, if you will, in a mass market offering. And because you want to be able to target a very broad audience, you have to, you have to take the complex and find a way to simplify it. So you can serve that top tier athlete, but you can't necessarily serve them in the right way, the specific way that you want to. So I think the answer to your question is yes, the platform and the communities that were being built was for the mass market, for the everyday athlete, if you will. There certainly was aspiration to serve that top tier athlete. That's what Under Armour is all about. At the end of the day, that's the source of the brand, if you will, brand value. But understanding that it was going to take more specialization to serve that top tier athlete versus a platform that's a little bit more generic and can serve a broad swath of athletes and consumers.
Okay, cool. So look, what are we going to talk about today?
I think the things that yeah, the things I wanted to talk about with everyone here, and then the pages will walk us through, is I wanted to just share what we learned from the connected fitness business and what we learned from building that at Under Armour, that which I can share. And then I'll talk a little bit about trackable devices. There's lots of talk and lots of discussion, lots of value creation, at least in the short-term market value creation around wearables and where do we think those wearables are going to be, and frankly, what's the role and value of them to the athlete, to the individual, and what's their role in this. And then I'll talk a little bit about what my sense for what tracking and data means for team sports, because at the end of the day, that's what Metrofit is about serving the team and serving the athlete through the team. And so I think that's the natural trend, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then ultimately, what's it all about? It's about the analytics and insights that drive the difference, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think that's true, and frankly where we are in that journey in very early stages of delivering on the true analytics and insights that both athletes and teams will need. But that's the golden goose, if you will. So I'll spend a little time at the end talking about why I think that's true. Sure.
Okay. Cool. So for everybody listening, as we work through what we're going to talk about for the next half hour, 40 minutes. Feel free to fire your questions into the box. I'll see them as they come up. If we don't answer them as we go along, we'll get to them at the very end, okay? So, embracing technology, Bill. So, I think it's probably fair to say that you're a proponent of technology. These are some of your thoughts.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that a lot of my thoughts, frankly, were formed out of where we were as a brand in Under Armour. We talk about a mission, where we talked about a mission of making athletes better and doing that through innovation, technology, et cetera. And so the brand where I was coming from and what we built in the last couple of years came from this idea that technology and empowering athletes through technology, embracing technology as a way to help athletes perform and find that next edge is critical. And that for us, it says here, go back to your mission, what's your purpose? That was our mission, and technology was a great enabler. And so if you want to empower athletes, which is what we wanted to do at Under Armour, the only do that is by putting tools in their hand, tools that they can use, whether that tool is initially a compression shirt, or that tool is a tracking device so they can know their heart rate in the middle of a run, or if it's another set of tools that track biometric data. Technology is the thing that will really allow us to, at the time, would allow us to deliver. And what the leader of connected fitness business, Robin Thurston, would say is that he believes every world record will be broken in the next 20 years because of the data and insight and knowledge that we'll have about what it takes to help an athlete perform at their peak on any given day in ways that we simply never had without technology in our hands before. So it's really a breakthrough. It's the next step, if you will, in really helping athletes deliver to their potential.
And I suppose with elite athletes and elite individual athletes, they have generally the backing of sports science behind them. They have a lot of analytical tools, and I suppose also for elite teams. But for teams at a level below, Metrofit is providing a solution here to help them monitor a team, giving them some technology and putting that data in their hands. Is it fair to say that this technology would be a vital cog in team development?
It is, and so I think the funny thing, at least to me, is Robin, again, the leader of Connected Fitness, is the founder of MapMyFitness, the first company that we bought. He was an elite bicycle racer. He raced in Europe. He raced for a long time professionally. And what he would tell you is that while they tracked a rich amount of data, they did it in a very old way. They did it by hand. They did it in cheats. So even the technology, even though the elite athletes are tracking a lot of this stuff, technology can still be an enabler for them. It enables them to do it more quickly. It enables them to bring lots of data together in an integrated way and to analyze and see that data sifted out and the results of it come out in a different way, things that they just can't do by hand. Absolutely, the technology is democratizing that. It used to be very, very hard to track how far I rode my bike every day and at what pace and how many watts I put out and what my heart rate was, and track how much I ate and track how I felt. You now have the ability to do that in not a 100% frictionless way, but a nearly frictionless way for the average Joe, a guy who runs 4 miles a week or 4 miles a day, can carry his phone or wear a Fitbit or wear a tracking device along, and they'll know how far I ran, what the pace was of that run, what my heart rate was along the way. They can very easily track the food intake throughout the day. They can track their mood and how they felt throughout the day, and they can, in a really simple way, see things that they simply couldn't see before. And there's still a lot of work to do in creating value out of that, telling the athlete, here's what you should do next. But technology has clearly democratized, taking what the elite, what only elite athletes had in the coaches that they had that they can afford, and bringing it to the masses, whether that's a Division II NCAA team, whether that's a high school football coach, whether that's the guy or gal who's trying to train for the Boston Marathon and is only going to run in a 2:45, not in a 2:02. Like technology has brought forward all of that to the masses in a way that frankly no one really expected, but many people are obviously using.
Okay, so moving on then, let's just talk about Under Armour and your experiences with Under Armour, what you took from it.
Yeah, so at UA, a lot of our digital, our strategy around digital started with the picture you see in the upper right-hand corner, which was that thing called Armour 39. Under Armour is a product company, and so naturally, as we thought about digital, the first thing we thought about was building a hardware product, which is what we did. On the heels of that, we built a shoe, which is in the marketplace now, which also tracks. And so Under Armour, at its core, being a product company, thought, well, if we're going to make technology, we have to put it into the shirts and shoes that we wear, and I think that's absolutely where Kevin will go. The thing that we realized is that that's only one step. That's really an enabler, and what you really have to do is capture the community, and you have to capture the software and the data side of it, and you have to integrate that hardware and software together to drive real insights. So there were just a tremendous amount of learnings from starting by trying to build a wearable to building a shoe, to buying companies that brought the data together, to building knowledge and insight, leveraging partnerships with people like SAP and IBM to bring all that together. So it's really, really quite hard to do. It's easy to draw the vision out for helping athletes be better and integrating technology and giving them this insight in the moment, but it's actually really hard to execute. And as the page shows here, we saw that one of the things that we were lacking as a physical product company was the software side, which drove the acquisitions of Map, Endo, and MyFitnessPal. That gave us the communities, that gave us access to people that as a $3 or $4 billion brand we simply didn't have access to, and it gave us access to insight which we simply couldn't generate off of the hardware that we could deliver into the marketplace. And then the next sort of big insight we had is with all that data and with all that community that we now had access to, there were, even amongst these three little apps, and there are hundreds of these kinds of apps, there were many ways of thinking about it. And there wasn't a single platform for even the average athlete to see it in a simple way. And so we built this thing called Under Armour Record, and the whole point was to synthesize and simplify down to the things that matter: sleep, fitness, activity, nutrition, and how do you feel. Like those 5 key insights became the mantra that we really focused on, because if you could boil it down, and if you talk to lots of doctors, and you talk to lots of medical professionals, while nobody has the magic answer, the things that you hear, the 5 things you hear consistently is: how much did you sleep? How little did you sleep? What is your fitness? What are your workouts? What do they look like? How do they go? What's your activity on a daily basis? Are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you moving? What are you putting into your body? What's the nutrition? And then what's your mental state? Do I feel good or not feel good? At what level of scale? Like those 5 things across all the data that we had, the millions and millions of pieces of data we had from the hardware and the communities and the software, it really boiled down to, you need to capture these 5 pieces of data, you need to synthesize them, and you need to figure out what the so what is of them. And so that became our focus, and that's why we built the Under Armour Record app, to encapsulate those 5 things for the athlete. And we thought, I don't know where their strategy is going right now, we thought that if you can do that for the athlete and then you can aggregate that for the team and you can see how that works across the team and for individual athletes, like that was the panacea. That's how you can solve the coaches' challenges of getting the team ready to perform at an elite level on any given day or on the right given day.
Sure. I mean, and pre-technology, and part of the story of how Metrofit came about is Peter had paper journals printed up and sold these to coaches who would connect them up and review the journals over the course of a week. Obviously very, very time consuming.
Right.
But, coaches were collating the data. So it's always been important. It's just now it's become more accessible and easier to get that, but not yet on the team platform.
No, I think that's right. I think that's a really important insight. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. Like, these are things that people have talked about and tried to capture for a long time. One of the sort of important key meetings we had is we brought an expert in. The person was a physiologist and had been around medicine a long time, and had been working with elite athletes for a long time. And this is as we were thinking through, does it make sense to acquire? Who does it make sense to acquire, et cetera. We asked a simple question: what are the things that we need to, like, what data do we need to go get? Because that will direct us on what apps to go get. And he said, well, the most important question that we found that you can ask the athlete is, how do you feel? Well, we're sitting there looking at ourselves like, holy smokes, how do you feel? That's qualitative. Nobody captures that. So what are we going to do? Like, so that became for us, like, how do we take together and get the data that matters, and then layer on the qualitative insight at the same time. And that's one of the things I love about what Metrofit does, is it captures that qualitative as well as the quantitative. And it says mixing these things together is actually what the recipe for success is. Because you can't just take the first 4 things if you don't know, because everyone's different. If you don't know, like, that when I sleep 6 hours and don't, and eat 4,000 calories, that I feel really bad or I feel really good, you don't actually know whether that sleep and that amount of fitness was right for that athlete. So the quality, the mindset is such a critical element that I think a lot of the app companies, a lot of the data companies, a lot of the wearable companies, they miss that layer of qualitative, how do you feel, the mental, the mindset. And it's super important in terms of actually getting real insight and real tactile recommendations to athletes and teams and coaches.
In the last webinar, we spoke to Brian Clark, who is at Noblesville High School in Indiana, and is using Metrofit to monitor 650 athletes across various sports. But one of the things he talked about was that, okay, it's great to gather this data. You can see an awful lot about the athletes, but the conversations that it then prompts, or the voice it gives to athletes that maybe quiet enough guys or girls who might not normally talk, but they can communicate via the app, or via the technology, has been a revelation for him. And he's seen a huge difference and seen a lot of opportunities to develop guys and girls on a new trajectory. So right. Obviously this is very, very important.
Right, I agree. I think what he's learned intuitively from being a coach for such a long time, we discovered, in somewhat of an analytical and non-methodical way, but we discovered in our work the same thing that he knew in his gut and learned from actually doing.
Okay. So, embrace technology, Bill.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of people, athletes, teams, coaches are looking at all this stuff happening around them, all this technology around them, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And my point to all of them is very simple. You don't have many choices. Well, one choice is to ignore it, put your head in the sand. And what I would say if you're doing that is you're simply going to miss the boat. Like, you are falling behind every day that you ignore it. And so the only other option is to embrace it and see where it takes you. It may not be obvious, but if you want to be on the right side of history, if you want to be on the winning side of the equation, you have to embrace the technology. It is best to jump in the water. Those who don't jump in will never learn how to swim. And by the way, you have to know how to swim because everyone else will have learned. So my simple point is that, which is no, they're not. There are not many options. Either jump in and embrace the technology or not. And there's no way you end up on the right side of history if you sit around and wait. It just is not going to happen.
And history has proven that, hasn't it?
Right. The world is moving away from you. If you're going to wait, you'll be behind.
So, Trackables. Talk to me about Trackables. I mean, the latest gadgets.
Yeah, I love these things because every time there's a new one, everybody goes crazy. And Fitbit was going to be the king of the world. And at the end of the day, the athletes don't care. They don't care. Eventually, you figure out like what 10,000 steps in a day looks like. Eventually, you figure out like when I'm asleep, I sleep. I know what 7 hours a night of sleep feels like, or 6 hours of sleep feels like. I think the trouble with a lot of trackables is they start to deliver data to people they just don't care about. And more importantly than even that, they don't tell you what to do about it. So we think wearables are important. At Under Armour, we believe that all of these things were eventually going to get embedded in your shirts and shoes. They're going to disappear. The value of them, the absolute clear value of them, is they make data collection frictionless. Because no one actually cares about the data that they capture. They care about what should I do about that now that I know it. What should I do now that I know that I walk 10,000 steps? What should I do now that I know I only sleep 6 hours a night? What should I do now that I know I burn X amount of glucose when I do a 6-hour workout that's the following way? What should I do now that the athlete, the team, the coach cares about what I should do about it? They don't care what the number is. And so my own view and our view at the time was that trackables are a necessary step in the evolution. They take friction out of the system, and that's really important because if you can't take friction out of the system to collect the data, you're still stuck writing it down in a book somewhere. So you need these, but they're not the value add. They're a necessary step in the evolution, and they're going to get better. We think, as I said, ultimately they're going to go away. You're not going to see them. They're going to be embedded in the shirts and shoes we wear. That'll biometric data, the activity data. It's going to be invisible to the consumer. No, I don't know if that's a year from now or 5 years from now or 7 years from now, but ultimately we believe once you solve some issues around battery and you solve some issues around washability, this stuff disappears to the athlete and the data gets captured in a frictionless way. That's one guy's view and the sort of modus operandi that we used at Under Armour.
So I mean, you could say then that actually what's inside them is really, really important though. The software, how it connects the data and how it delivers it back to you, and then what you do about it.
Yeah, the trouble is that look at this page, and this is just a set of them. Like these things capture data, they capture a bunch of information, but they don't capture insight, and they don't layer on like what I should do. The software that takes that data out, synthesizes it, analyzes it, and says, here's what your trends are, here's how you've been performing, here's how you've been operating as an athlete relative to your goal set, and therefore here's how you should change your sleep pattern, or here's how you should change your activity pattern, or here's how you should change your eating pattern, or here's how you should change your workout pattern. This will give you better results. The software that tells you that is where you get the win. Capturing X steps versus Y steps, X amount of glucose versus Y amount of glucose, this level of breathing versus that level of breathing, that's all useful, but it's not valuable. The value comes from what should I do about it.
Okay. And a question in from Antonio. He wants to know, what about Trackables reliability? Do you want to present a view on that?
It's so it's the funny secret. They're not very reliable. What you get with the value and even the data capture is the trend over time, because they're equally, let's say, equally wrong on any given day. But if you can see over time how it looks, then you remove some of that error rate, if you will. But that's, I think, one of the weaknesses of people relying too much on, I walked 10,000 steps, or my heart rate was X. There are very few ways to get make a really valid heart rate in a workout. It takes a heart rate strap. If it's on your wrist, it's wrong. It's really wrong, probably. But over time, if you draw the trend lines are useful to see. But in any given workout, there's absolutely an accuracy challenge, and that's why Fitbit has been sued as it relates to the accuracy of the heart rate on their wrist, particularly in workouts. So I think that accuracy will improve. The technology will absolutely get better and better, and accuracy on any individual workout or set of activities will get better and better as the algorithms get better and the devices and hardware gets better. But the value today is really the trend lines you can draw, because there's error rate, there's real error rate in the individual day data, individual activity data, but you can see over time and look at the over time trends, and that's where there's value in some of the data that you're getting off of them today.
Sure. Okay. So let's talk about team sports then a bit.
Excuse me. Yeah. So as we talked about earlier, we at Under Armour we entered the market through the individual athlete. We saw the opportunity there to enter, and part of it is that, as you can see here, the challenges we understand is we think about team sports as first measuring, second is understanding, third is controlling, and fourth is improving. And that's 4 very hard steps: measuring the amount of activity, the amount of intake, the amount of sleep, etc. Understanding it, doing the analysis, figuring out what that means, and then controlling for it. How do you make sure that I don't sleep X amount, but I sleep Y amount, that I don't eat X, that I eat Y, and then actually improving along that is really hard for a single person. Those 4 things are hard by themselves, and it's hard to do that for an individual athlete. Doing that at the level of a team, when you have 10 basketball players or 20 soccer players or 50 football players, very, very, very hard. But these things all have to come into play for you to get the performance out of your athlete and out of your team if you want to be successful. And so getting to this solution, getting to this place becomes a challenge.
Okay. And if we look, you have some stats here just on kids and their involvement.
Yeah, I think that the point here is really to say that we believe that getting after this, a lot of people we talked earlier about hey, the NFL can do this, or the EPL, those teams can do this, and that's all good. But the truth of the matter is where you can have a lot of impact on athletes and teams is much, much earlier in their lives and in their careers, if you will, in those early stages where they become active and they start to engage team sports. That's where we think the real value is in helping those athletes get better, because by the time they get to the EPL, we've sort of sifted out the best of the best of the best, if you will. But we can do a lot more early in their career, early in their athletic lives, to help those who have the potential to get to that place of greatness. And so the point here is that there are just a tremendous amount of athletes and teams out there that we can really help, that is beyond the pinnacle, that's much, much deeper. The truth of the matter is where we see this stuff get used is at the tip of the iceberg. Our point here is that there's a lot of ice under the water, a lot of the iceberg under the water, and a lot of teams to be served, a lot of athletes to be served, and to help achieve their dreams.
I think what's interesting here as well, Bill, is that, the kids we're looking at here. So you got the number 21.5 million, the total number of kids between 6 and 17 playing team sports, and all of these kids have grown up in a technology-driven world. This is not a big stretch for these kids to use technology to monitor themselves and their teammates. So it's a really powerful thing, I would think.
That's a wonderful point. I mean, there's an where a professional player today might say, that's an invasion of privacy. They're tracking my sleep, and why do I have to tell you what I'm eating? It's a natural act for these kids today. It's a natural act to have technology on their person, understanding everything they're doing. It's a second nature thing because they've grown up with it that way. Whereas folks like me and you, Brian, who didn't grow up with it, it feels a little bit more invasive. It's not going to be invasive to these guys. It's an expectation. Technology is everywhere, and they expect it everywhere, so they're not going to be surprised.
And they're far more likely to embrace it and embrace the developments in the technology as it moves forward.
Right, and take its direction, and importantly, take the direction that technology gives them. They're not going to say, oh, that's some data you got off of a Trackable, and that's some software thing, that's some algorithm you wrote. I don't believe it. My gut says something different. They're going to accept what comes out of it, the data and the insights and the analysis that comes out of that technology. Much more accepting of what the technology delivers, and much more believable to them. When Siri says to go left versus go right, they listen to Siri. Whereas you might be a little skeptical that Siri knows what the heck she's talking about.
Frequently, actually, and I think they're probably more likely to understand the data that they're getting. So look, I'm an ex-elite athlete, and we didn't get this kind of data,
Right.
and if we did, I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So a lot for me would have been good, and I'm sure for you too.
Yeah.
So if we just talk about some of the analytics and what about this data that's processed.
Yeah, so I mean, and we talked about it earlier, and it's I think a little bit of the challenge of Trackables. Like there's, the amount of data is growing geometrically. I mean, geometrically. We went from, we're basically holding terabytes of data. At Under Armour, we were adding terabytes of data every day based on the number of folks we have. There's more, we are drowning in data. We're not drowning in insight, what we're drowning in is data. And so figuring out, identifying trends, identifying patterns, and getting to real insight out of that data, like that's the nut that nobody has cracked, and that's the value that somebody can layer on. Because as I said earlier, as an athlete, I don't know what to do with, like, I burned X amount of glucose. I don't know what to do with I ate 3,000 versus 4,000 calories. If I don't know what to do with that stuff, it's not really helping me. And so right now what we're doing is a little bit of pollution. Like, we're tracking everything, and we're collecting data, every day, as I said, terabytes worth. But no one's yet figured out how to take that and boil it down to simple insights that tell the athlete or the team what to do tomorrow and what not to do tomorrow. And the challenge, as it says on the right, is to get to the simplest product. The most amazing products are the ones that can really concisely deliver an insight to you and tell you what to do. And doing that is a huge challenge. And part of it is that a lot of what we're doing is we're putting scientists into this, and scientists like to get into the detail, and they like to know and understand every nuance. And everyone on this phone knows, anyone who's a coach knows that an athlete in the field of play can only absorb a few things. They can't absorb hundreds of reams of detail at the moment of impact, if you will. So you've got to find a way to simplify all that data and the insights down to the, okay, what I want you to do now is go left or go right, go straight, go slow, go fast. You need to be able to simplify so that the athlete can consume it in the moment and act on it in the moment.
Yeah, this might be a good point. It might be a good point in the conversation to bring Anne in, who's the technology expert and analytics expert here. And could you talk to us a little bit about the descriptive analytics involved in Metrofit?
Well, I think I come, I suppose, from a background of analytics in the corporate world, which is much more defined, and you have a lot more expertise in different companies and how to deal with all of that. I think one of the things I realized in the sports world is it really is very different. I mean, most of the work is done out in the field or out in the pitch or on the basketball court, and that takes up a lot of all these coaches' times. Some of the really big elite clubs would have a team of sports scientists and people who have time. But as you want to kind of bring this whole idea of descriptive analytics and modeling and changing the way you think into the forefront, you really need to start at the basics level, as Bill said, and really give people something that they can act on, what we call actionable intelligence. So there's no point giving them reams and reams of report and information if they can't do anything or act on it. And that can start off just with simple trends and patterns. Even there's great value in doing that from subjective information, because a lot of these clubs and associations can't afford the trackables for their whole team. So you start the process of getting that basic information in and giving out descriptives on what you can do at a basic level. So you look at things, we're looking at things like sleep, like mood state, like nutrition. We're trying to make the athlete more self-aware of how all of these things affect each other. Because there's an education process here as well, where you can just go back to the athlete or the coach and say, okay, this person here is showing this trend where he's affected badly by sleep before competition. Something as simple as that. And it's amazing the type of information that's staring at people, but they don't see it or they don't realize and they don't make the connections because there's too much information being thrown at them. So
Sure.
that's our, obviously start with that descriptive analytics initially.
And coaches can then take these analytics and create some behavior change in the athlete to improve them.
Yeah, and the idea then is to kind of highlight to them which athletes need more attention than the others at that particular time.
Okay, so I have a question in here from Antonio. What about synthetic index? And do you use them or do you prefer single raw data for your evaluation? Does that need clarification from Antonio?
Okay, I think Antonio's getting into, specific terminology in analytics that's, is probably too detailed for where we are, because I would need more information on exactly what he's trying to do. So I can take that offline with Antonio after the webinar.
Sure, cool. Okay, so let's move on here, and Bill, let's talk about Metrofit. What do you see?
Yeah. So part of what I love about it and why I agreed to and frankly been working with Peter and Ann for a while now is that what I love about it is that they're starting to pull together simple dashboard ways for coaches to see the entire team, see individual athletes, but see the entire team come together. And part of that is, as it says here, I think we're at the beginning of the curve here. I think we're at the beginning of capturing a tremendous amount of data, and Metrofit is starting us on a path of simplify and synthesize and give me real insight, both for my athletes and for my team in total. And you'll see if you get into the product, you would see these dashboards and colors, red, green, yellow, which are very simple ways for us to identify hot spots and good spots, and very simple ways to capture content as it relates to those things. So the net of it is, I think we're early days into solving the problem for the team. I think Metrofit is taking a really great leap forward of pulling a lot of athlete data together and simplifying it for the coach. The coach only has so many hours. You can only sleep on your under your desk so many times. And Metrofit is finding ways for coaches to easily and quickly get insight out of the smog of data that we talked about earlier. And I think it's a real opportunity for coaches to understand their team and understand their athletes better so that they can deliver greater performance out of them and win more, which is what it's all about.
Sure, yeah. And that simplicity is beauty piece is really, really important as well. I mean, as much as kids now are technology savvy, they want it quickly, they want it easy, they want to absorb that information as simply and as effectively as possible, right?
Absolutely. It just isn't enough. There's not enough time to wade through all the data that's out there for us. And so whether it's for the athlete to understand quickly and simply, or whether it's for the coach to understand it quickly and simply, I think it's critical, and now is the time for folks to start after it. And Metrofit hasn't waited. They frankly are ahead of the curve here in terms of being able to do that for the athlete and for the coach.
Okay, so we're at the end. So if anybody has any questions they want to put out there, now would be a good time to do it. I have one other question from Antonio actually, going back to the conversation on Trackables, and you talked about studying trends, and Antonio saying how can you study a trend with random data? So the GPS is too big. Does that make sense?
Because it's not 100% random. There's an error rate in any individual day, but if you can see trends, and you can see trends over time, even with that error rate in it. So for example, like if I ran with my phone the same route every day, there would be about probably 10 to 15% error. But if you look at that line over the, call it 10 days straight of running, you would see that there's a pretty good trend that it's a 3.5 mile run. It might be one day measure 3.7, the next day measure 3.2, but over a long enough period of time, I can see that it's a 3.5 mile run, plus or minus a little bit. And it's the same as it relates to food and as it relates to these other metrics as well.
Okay, it tends to even itself out over time. Okay, so
I mean, I admit it's not perfect. I'm not suggesting it's perfect, and I'm not suggesting it's optimal. But what I'm suggesting is that it's way better than anything you've got right now. And as long as you're comfortable with error rate and comfortable looking over periods of time and trends, you're going to gain much, much more insight and knowledge and know-how than you've ever had in the past. So it's not just to be clear, it's not me saying, oh, it's good enough. It's nowhere near good enough, but it is a far leap forward.
Okay, so another question. What's your experience and feedback from the data analyst to the head coach? So again, an apology for poor English. So I think, yeah, what's your experience and feedback from the data analyst to the head coach? Actually, and you might want to take that. I think what he's getting at here is the transfer of information to the head coach and how they use it. What do the head coaches say?
Yeah, I think it varies very different depending on the client that we have. So for example, if you're working with maybe basketball or American football in some of the big American colleges, and Bill can probably come in here on this as well, sometimes the strength and conditioning coaches, share minimal data with the head coach, because there's a lot of politics going on with, do I get on the team or am I able to play? And the head coach just really wants to know, okay, I'm going to put him on, and what's the story with them? There's much more of a trust, relationship with strength and conditioning coach with regards to, player and athlete welfare and getting the best out of them, and that relationship tends to be much closer. So in some instances, the head coach might just get some basic information from the strength and conditioning coaches. In other sports and in other situations, the head coach might be the person who's doing all the analysis themselves. So there's a great variation in that.
Yeah, so like anything, it's going to depend on how the organization is set up, and who wants the data. Okay, so look, we've arrived at the end. I want to say a big thank you to Bill for his time in preparation for this, and obviously being here this evening, and to Peter and Anne. Our next webinar in this series is actually next Thursday. We have Eric Helland from the University of Wisconsin with us for a chat. I think it's something that would be well worth tuning in for. So thanks to everybody for coming along, for being online and listening in, and hopefully you'll be along again next week. Okay, thanks guys. Take care.
Thanks Brian. Thanks Bill.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
You got it.